Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to BrightGen's Salesforce release webinar for Winter 18. This will be our 16th Salesforce webinar. Our first one was for Winter 13, so Kier's getting the hang of it by now, I hope. And anyway, for our regular viewers, take the usual format, but for our first timers, the way it works is in a second, there's a couple of good-looking chaps there, one of which is not me, as it is Kier. In a second, I'll hand over to Kier, who's going to run through the highlights of the latest release. If you have any questions, please do use the chat or questions function on the webinar panel. I'll be collating those, and Kier will answer those off at the end of the session.
Or try to, anyway.
yeah, I'm sure that'll be your challenge, to see if you can catch him out with a really decent question.
Stump the jump.
Yeah. Anyway, here's the agenda. I won't read it out. You can see that for yourself. But the things to watch out for is obviously the first section with some features that we're saying goodbye to as part of this release. There's quite a bit in all the other sections around Lightning Experience. Particularly, there's a number of features that are coming on board are being enhanced in the communities sphere. So lots of good stuff coming. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Kier. Please send your questions in, and we'll cover those off at the end, as I say. And so Kier, here he is, ladies and gentlemen, your very own Mr. Kier Bowden.
Thank you for that, Clive. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here again for our 16th webinar. Has it really been, 5 years? Only seems like about 15. Right, so pressing on. The first item we have is some more fond farewells as more features join the choir invisible and shuffle off this mortal coil. So the cloud scheduler is now retired. So if you've been using that and you had any existing proposals out there, they will now indicate the feature is no longer available, and they'll suggest that invitees contact the organizer. The free data.com account assessments are no longer available, and you no longer have access to any that you ran prior to the Winter 18 release. And in conjunction with this, the data.com tab in Salesforce Classic is now available only to licensed customers of data.com Prospector. So previously, all Salesforce customers could use the tab to search for records, but the data.com side of things is being the kind of little free tasters you used to get are now being removed from the system, and you'll have to buy a license if you want to use those. I've been saying this one for a while. Chatter Answers will retire in the Spring 18 release, so it's a few months, about 3 months away now, the full retirement. The recommendation is to move to Chatter Questions, which gives you the same functionality effectively and more of it. The classic mobile applications retire on December the 1st. So these don't just retire as in they're no longer supported, but they'll no longer be available in the iTunes and Google Play stores, and also any existing applications that you have installed will stop working on December the 1st. So if you are using one of those, you need to make some alternative plans in the next month or two. Legacy charts in Salesforce 1 are beginning a phased retirement process in this release. So if you create a new org as of now, legacy charts are being replaced and you can't revert back to them. If you created your org before summer 16, then your legacy charts have been replaced by enhanced charts, but you can switch back to them if you so desire. Not that I would recommend it, because they're not as good as the new enhanced charts. Come Spring 18, everybody will be switched to the enhanced charts, and there will be no option to revert back to the legacy charting solution. So the easiest thing is just to start using the new solution and get used to it, I guess. The Kakua templates are no longer available for new communities. Existing communities will continue to be supported, but there'll be no new work done on those templates. The advice is to move to the Napili template, because that is the one where all the focus is going forward. Finally, JavaScript in the hyperlink function. I don't know how many people are aware that you could still embed JavaScript in there. This is about the last place that you could drop in some unsafe JavaScript, which could facilitate a cross-site scripting attack. This will be blocked come 30th of October with the enforcement of a critical update. So those are the areas we're saying goodbye to. So now let's move on to the new features that we're going to be seeing, starting with the Sales Cloud. So Einstein AI is being embedded a little bit further into the Sales Cloud. Historic leads are now scored even if they didn't get converted into opportunities, whereas previously, if you didn't have an opportunity, then those leads wouldn't be taken into account. They still have to be converted, but they can be converted into existing accounts and contacts rather than leaded to an opportunity. You can track the enablement process for Einstein lead scoring, which you never used to be able to. You just used to turn it on and wait for an email, however long that took. And you can also turn it off if you need to, which is quite a nice feature if you decide it's not for you. And finally, you can use Einstein lead scoring in Salesforce Classic once you're licensed, obviously. There's an Einstein score field that will appear once you've got a license in the Classic page layout editor, and you can just drop that onto the page layout, and that'll automatically give you the Einstein prediction score for that. A few more improvements around the Lightning Experience version of Sales Cloud. So lead conversion can now match against existing contacts and accounts, which is quite a big gap really that's been up to now, but that's now there. Collaborative forecasts are now supported. Task reminders now create notifications, so you'll see the little bell at the top of the Lightning Experience will turn red if there's a task notification, and you'll also get a notification card if you happen to be on that page. And the activity timeline can now display all past history, including all archived items. So you can see everything that's gone on with a particular account, contact, opportunity, etc., through the activity history trail. Okay, list views can now wrap the text in columns, although not in the headers. So in this example screenshot here, the opportunity name column's clipped, so we see things like Burlington Textiles were and Dickinson Mobile because the opportunity name column is clipped, as is shown in the context menu there. But if I change that by clicking the down chevron, choose the wrap option, then what I get is the text is wrapped, which wraps the opportunity names onto multiple lines and allows me to see Burlington Textiles weaving plant generator in all its full glory. Note, as I say, this only applies to the contents of the column, because as you can see, opportunity name is still opportunity at the moment. You can't change that. You can now send emails to members of a lead or contact list view. So once you've opened the view, as I have there, you can check the box next to the name of each person you want to email. Then you click the send list email button, which may be in a drop down depending on how many buttons that you have. It is in my case, and this will open the email composer. I can then choose a template or add the text directly in, including merge fields. Once I've composed my email, I can select the preview tab. And what this allows me to do is to see exactly the contents that will be sent to each of those recipients, confirming all the merge fields are correctly replaced, etc. So I can do all that without really leaving the list view, without having to go and send a mass email or anything like that. So hopefully that will be a bit of a time saver in the Lightning Experience. Okay, next up we have Service Cloud. So Service Cloud is getting some love on the Lightning side of things, having been probably a little bit of a poor relation for a while. So we have a streamlined knowledge setup flow in Lightning Experience. Case milestones are now supported, as are service contracts, and you can clone a case, and you can also add a comment to a case via a related list. So those last for very much about adding some feature parity in the Lightning Experience to Service Cloud in Classic, but still a way to go. So next we have Lightning Knowledge, some more new features here. You can now create articles directly while managing cases using Lightning Knowledge. You can embed videos and code blocks directly into articles. You can now choose the data categories for an article when you're in Lightning Knowledge, again getting a bit nearer to feature parity with the Classic Knowledge. And when you search for an article, you can sort the results by field, by particular a number of one of many fields, in ascending or descending order. And a few additional Service Cloud tweaks. You can now have up to 15,000 queued omni-channel work items, which is up from 5,000 in the previous release. So it's got particularly large call center, etc. You should be able to handle that a bit better. If you've got a load of user presence status values in omni-channel that you no longer use, you can now clean them up. That's via the API only at the moment, but at least you have a mechanism to do it. Finally, there's a new custom requested date time field. So what this does, it allows you to capture the time of the customer's original request, which gets retained when it's rerouted to another agent. In previous releases, you didn't really know when the customer had made that request. All you knew was the last time that it was rerouted. So what could happen is you could have something that had been open for a little while, and you wouldn't be able to see that that had been open for that long if it had been recently rerouted. So it could end up at the back of the queue, even though that customer had been waiting for quite a while. So this should give you a better idea of how long a customer has been waiting for someone to deal with their work items. Okay, next up, analytics. So in the Lightning experience, you can now embed dashboards via the Lightning App Builder. So just like you used to be able to do with Salesforce Classic and the homepage editor. So when you're in the Lightning App Builder, you'll see a new dashboard component in the left-hand palette, as shown here. So if you drag this onto a page, it'll then automatically display a form which allows you to choose which dashboard you want to embed. If you leave the maximum height blank there, it'll expand to take up as much or as little space as you need. And also you've got a nice hide on error checkbox there, which means if there is a problem with the dashboard, don't display it. Don't take up some of the user's real estate just with an error message. They don't need to see that. So the screenshot here shows a dashboard embedded into the home page in a kind of wide section. However, if you place the dashboard where there isn't enough space to render it, so for example in a narrow column on the left or right hand side, all we get there is the dashboard title and a link to navigate to it to move away from the home page. So at the moment, note that you can only embed dashboards into home and Lightning app pages, not record home pages. So you can't embed a dashboard at the top of an account or a contact, for example, just the home or a generic Lightning application page. For a Lightning Experience dashboard, you can click on a chart segment to view a filtered report with details for that specific segment. So in my chart here, if I click on the, which is showing me opportunities by stage, if I click on the segment for opportunities in the proposal price quote stage, sorry, Clive, I just see that. Okay, it was hidden from me. Sorry. So it's showing the right thing. And if I click on that, then I get to see the source report for the chart, opportunities by stage. It's open with a filter to display only those that are in the proposal price quote stage, which was the area that I clicked in. So hopefully, again, a bit of a time saver there. If you want to drill into exactly what the details are in any particular area, then just click on the chart. Some more changes to Lightning Experience Analytics. Wave Analytics has been renamed Einstein Analytics. Wave does still appear, I think, from time to time in the documentation and some of the Salesforce marketing, but that will disappear over time. So anything new that comes out around this will be branded as Einstein Analytics. So just be aware of that change. Enhanced folder sharing is now supported in the Lightning Experience, as well as Classic. And you can now choose up to 500 groupings in line or bar charts, although I suspect if you get anywhere near that number, you won't have a particularly readable chart for your user, so maybe think about that and use it with care. And finally, horizontal and stacked bar charts now support up to 4 measures. Next, communities. So there's a new version of the Napili template in Winter 18. So the Napili template is the template that you use if you want to build a community using Lightning components and with the Salesforce Lightning design system with a lot of built-in functionality around accessing Salesforce data, etc. So as I say, new template in Winter 18, and you will need to upgrade to this to get the new functionality. However, as I say in the third point there, upgrading may impact your community configuration. It may not be as simple as just upgrading to the latest template. You may have to make some changes to your existing setup. So the short link there will take you to a document which will show you, explain a lot more about how you may be affected by these changes depending on your community. So read that first before making this decision. And we've got a gentle reminder at the end there, always apply the new template in a sandbox and test thoroughly before promoting to production. Because once that hits production, anything that happens there is going to be live with your users. And if you have had some impact that you haven't handled, then they may not have a great experience. Branding sets. So there's a new feature in Winter 18. This allows you to present different branding depending on an audience, but from the same community. Rather than having to build multiple communities or having to have a load of complex logic deciding what to display to who, you can basically define colors, fonts, logos, background images, and line thickness. And you can then say for a particular audience, a particular user that matches this criteria, falls into this audience, and they get to see this particular branding. You must be using the latest Napili template to use branding sets. So as in the previous slide, you need to upgrade. Before you upgrade, make sure that it's not going to break your community. And you also need to define a default so that any audience that doesn't match any of your criteria still sees branded content. It doesn't just appear all white or whatever. You can now create audiences based on user criteria. So, for example, the name of the company they work for or the city that they live in. So you could potentially show everybody that works for a particular company something that is branded a little bit more towards their branding. If you have more than two or more branding sets or page variations, both of which are segmented but can be segmented by audience, you can now order them. So basically, if you have a user who falls into 3 or 4 audiences, so which one do you display? What it will display is the highest ranked one, the one nearest the top. So you can choose what is the most appropriate branding, the most important branding, and then you can gradually fall back on the others as people become less granular. They just fall into 1 or 2 segments. Okay, finally for communities, there's a new customer account portal. So it's this community cloud template, so it's a lightning bolt style template, and you can use this to allow members to access and update their account information, search the knowledge base, and upload files. And it's all branded up and comes with a bunch of images, etc. on it, and there's just a little screenshot of that. A few more changes to communities. There's a new Community 360 console component. So this allows you to view the aggregate activity of a customer across all your communities and also up to 15 months of history. And the component shows you things like articles, case views, their posts, and their comments. When you're setting up a template, there is now a branding step, so you can choose to set up the branding at that point in time, or you can do it later on with branding sets. You can also build your own template. So rather than being stuck on the Napili, or not stuck on the Napili template, but rather than having to live with what the Napili template gives you, if that doesn't exactly match your requirements, then you can build your own template from scratch. And finally, you can export any customized Lightning template now as a Lightning bolt. The idea of a lightning bolt is that's a template that you could give to your customers, you could give to your partners. I guess you could eventually end up selling it on an app exchange type of thing with your particular template. So if you do something that is particularly useful in your particular sphere of business, then that is the kind of thing that you might want to consider using as a lightning bolt or exporting as a lightning bolt, so that other people in your as the phone goes off to say stop saying lightning bolt.
So yeah, it's the lightning bolt alarm. So you said it.
Indeed, I said it 11 times. I was hoping to keep it down, but I couldn't do it, I'm afraid.
There's a governor limit on, I'm afraid.
So moving on then from lightning bolt templates, I'm sure you will understand those now. Chatter. So it wouldn't be a Salesforce release without some chatter changes. Winter 18 is no exception. Encryption. Chatter encryption is now GA, something that's probably of interest if you're in a regulated industry where you don't necessarily want anybody to be able to wander into private or unlisted groups and see the details if they find out about them. The following items are encrypted, and I'm just going to read them off for the sake of the recording, for the sake of the tape, as they say. So posts and comments are encrypted, questions and answers, linked labels and URLs, polls and the choices that you can make in those polls, and content that has been created from rich publisher apps. So all of that can be encrypted and secured. Default chatter theming has changed. So group headers now default to the trailhead theme as shown. And user profiles do much the same, but they also get a trailhead card as shown on the right-hand side with the links to go and connect to people in the trailhead community or to go and find new trails. Only you see that. Nobody else sees that particular trailhead card, so you don't have to worry about everybody seeing that on everybody's profile. You can change the themes and profile photos if you find them a bit Disneyfied, which I'm sure one or two customers will, but they will default to this. So if you don't change them, you will get this kind of cartoon effect. Chatter now supports emojis, so that should make a few people happy, I guess, but in the Lightning experience and Lightning communities only, so you can react with emojis, with a thumbs up, with a smiley face and all that good stuff. You can now add files to records but keep them private, whereas previously any files that you added to a record were visible to all users who had access to that record. And finally, out of the office is now generally available. So you need to enable this in Chatter settings. There's a checkbox that you have to check. Once you've done that, users are then able to select the dates they're out, customize the default message as I have here, gone but not forgotten. And then if anyone views my profile, what they see is that I'm gone but not forgotten from September 29th to October the 11th in all its trailhead glory. Next, Salesforce 1. So, a number of changes to Salesforce 1, most of which have caveats against them. You can change the territory assigned to an opportunity record, and you can view the territories assigned to an account, but you cannot change the territories assigned to an account. You can manage service contracts, and you can delete and edit contract line items. However, you can't create them. You can only manage the ones that are already there. You can view case milestones, but not the milestone tracker. That will almost certainly be optimized for the desktop and work in a Visualforce style of way. And finally, you can clone cases in Salesforce 1, much like you can in the Lightning experience. You'll notice that a number of these items are also new to the Lightning experience. There's quite a lot of synergy. It's built on much the same technology, the Lightning experience and Salesforce 1, but Salesforce 1 tends to lag slightly behind. There's a few things that don't really work that well on the mobile device straight out of the box. Okay, and everyone can now breathe a sigh of relief as we move on to our final topic for the day, my personal favourite, customization. So, first thing we have is dynamic Lightning pages. So anyone that has embedded Visualforce pages into classic page layouts, this is going to be a welcome change. Basically, this allows you to show or hide components in Lightning pages through the drag and drop Lightning app builder. But if a component is hidden, no trace of it will appear. So there's no white space block. It doesn't take up the space. You're not going to try and figure out if there's some way you can refresh the page and realize that has happened. Basically, if the component isn't there, the component doesn't appear, which I'll show on the next slide. So when you add a component, you have the option to set its visibility via filters. So if you select the Add Filter button, what this will do is it will open up a form that allows you to create a new filter. So in this case, I've said the amount needs to be greater than or equal to 1 million before this component should display on an opportunity. So if I click an opportunity where the amount is considerably greater than 1 million, 11.5 million in this case, you can see my big deal component in all its fetching glory appears, particularly well styled, I thought, screaming big deal, big deal, big deal at you at the top of his lungs. Now, back in the days of Visualforce and Salesforce Classic, if we didn't want to display that, there'd still be a big white component there. It just wouldn't say big deal, big deal. It would just say nothing. It'd be empty, but it would still take up real estate. So it was always a bit of a challenge as to how to lay out your page so that wasn't too much of a problem. However, in the Lightning experience, if I view one that isn't a big deal, it's under 1 million, 235,000 in this case, not only doesn't it appear, but everything else beneath it comes up to take up the space. So there's no space, there's no trace of it there. Much better user experience. You can probably tell I'm really pleased to see this one because I wrangled Visualforce pages into all sorts of places on classic layouts and never really been satisfied with anything that we were able to do. There's a new Lightning component for the Lightning App Builder, which displays quick links for records-related lists. So again, something that should be familiar from Classic. So here I've added this to the Details tab for a record, and it shows brief details of the top related lists. So I've got 2 contacts, no cases, no opportunities. I've got a show all button, a show all link rather, so I can click that and see all of the high-level details of all of the related lists. But also, if I hover over a particular list, so contacts in this case, then what that'll do is that'll show me the full related list of the contacts in a popover without me having to navigate away from the record. So as soon as I go out of that, I'm back in the record and I'm fine. So I would think this is going to be a bit of a time saver as well. So another feature that we're pleased to see. A few more changes on the customization side of things. You can clone existing Lightning pages rather than having to recreate them from scratch. So if you're doing a lot of that, which I am at the moment in our Bright Media products, that would be very nice. You aren't limited to the standard Lightning page templates anymore. You can create custom page templates. Now, what this means is when you create a Lightning application page, you choose the type of template that you want, which is typically like header, sidebar, main area, header, sidebar, right-hand column, those kind of things. But it's your general kind of layout of the page where you're going to be able to drop those particular elements into. So now you can create your own custom ones. They're used in the Lightning App Builder, but you do need to have some basic Lightning component development skills to be able to create custom ones. They're not particularly difficult. You don't necessarily have to be able to write JavaScript code, but you do have to be able to manage the markup side of things. You can now queue up to 1,000 workflow time triggers per hour. So this is if you've got time-based workflow, which basically says I'm going to send this email out this many days after, or this many hours after this particular field. You can now have up to 1,000 of those queued per hour. If you exceed 1,000, they'll just go on to the next hour. By default, this is enabled on new orgs, but if you're an existing org, you'll have to contact Salesforce and ask them to change that limit for you. You're no longer allowed to delete actions that have been added to page layouts. So this should help with maintaining the integrity of your customizations. Because at the moment, you can put it on a page layout, you can delete it, and then I'm not really sure what would happen. I guess you'd see a bit of a blank area. And finally, you can style login flows. I don't know if anyone's used login flows. This allows you to effectively intercept a user after they've put in their credentials, but before they get to their home page, and ask them to tick a box to say that they agree to something, some new condition that's being imposed on them, or something along those lines anyway. Up until now, you've only been allowed to style those as classic. So if you're in Lightning Experience, they didn't look fantastic. Now you can style them as classic and Lightning, or Lightning rather. Next, a few changes that apply specifically to developers. So if you're an admin or a business user, you don't need to worry about these. So there are a bunch of new base Lightning components available. Base Lightning components really are like standard Visualforce components. They provide a discrete set of functionality, so some form of input or laying out a data table, being able to include a sales path in a single component, for example. And the Lightning Data Service is now generally available. So to continue with the Visualforce metaphor, this is really like Visualforce standard controllers that allow you to manage record access via markup as opposed to having to write a custom controller. Now, both of these that I've mentioned here, the base Lightning components and the Lightning Data Service, require your containing component to be at the Winter 18 API version of 41. This means the locker service will be enabled as well. So if you're thinking of going this route, you need to test your application thoroughly, because the locker service does introduce a few gotchas, and you may find that certain things don't work exactly as you're expecting once it's enabled. If you're using the developer console, then your Lightning component JavaScript will be validated on save, which is absolutely fantastic, because the amount of times that I save JavaScript that is invalid and then it either fails to load the page or it immediately errors as soon as the page appears, that will be a real time saver. Deployments via metadata API, change sets, and installing upgrading a package now recompile all Apex code. So previously that didn't happen, which meant that it was possible. It wasn't easy, but it was possible to make a config change that broke some code, and you wouldn't find out until something triggered the recompilation to then execute that code. And finally, the new Salesforce developer experience is now generally available, or it will be in the middle of October, as soon as just after Winter 18 goes live. Now, I'm not going to go into this in any detail. It's a really big topic, which is probably of more interest to ISVs and partners like us than it is to end user customers. So I'm not going to go into it in any great detail. However, if you want to know more, contact your friendly service manager, and they will be able to set something up to enable you to find out more and ask questions of an expert, etc. So well done, everyone. Congratulations. This concludes our brief journey through Winter 18. So as usual, we've highlighted the key features that we think are most interesting for our customers. There's 586 pages of release notes this time, so there's obviously quite a lot that we didn't go into because we don't want to bore people to death. And there's also going to be plenty more detail on those elements that we did cover because we can only go into it to a certain level without getting too bogged down in it. So if you visit the short link shown here, you'll find the full set of release notes for your enjoyment, a bunch of demo videos, training information. There's absolutely loads of information out there. So head over to there, have a look at anything. If there's anything you want to know more about in any detail, then again, contact your friendly service manager and they'll be able to set that up. So that's me done from the scripted point of view. So do we have any questions, Clive?
Yes, we do.
Oh dear.
Excellent. Good luck. So the first one is around Kanban opportunity view. It's the person who's asking us that they've heard you cannot add quick tasks to opportunities in this view anymore unless you buy Einstein. Is that correct?
It depends who you've heard that from, I guess. It's not something I've heard, but it's not something that I would necessarily have heard about anyway. So the best person to talk to about that would be your Salesforce account executive, because those kind of things we can't really advise on because we have no control over any of that, and we typically wouldn't necessarily know that level of detail about changes to the licenses.
Okay, thank you. Someone's very happy about the word wrapping.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So we've got things we're happy about in this release.
I'm glad people are finding that useful. So next question, how is Lightning performing now?
Lightning is a lot faster. I think it got a lot faster in the it's got a bit faster in spring 17, got a lot faster in summer 17. I haven't really hit it that hard in winter 18, so I'm currently in a pre-release org, so I would have to install quite a lot of code and configure quite a lot of stuff to be able to test that. So we'll be kind of putting that through its paces once it goes live on our Bright Media demo system, which I think is scheduled for this weekend. But it is, we're finding what I tend to find is it's not consistent across orgs. So we've got some orgs which are absolutely really like Lightning. They're so fast that I wonder if anything's actually happening. And they've got one or two which seem to be quite sluggish, and we've never really been able to identify what that issue is, or indeed whether it was just our network connection at that point in time. As I say, the pattern seems to be that we've got certain orgs that are a bit sluggish, but it's if you haven't looked at it for a while, it's orders of magnitude faster than it used to be. It really is much better.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Another question. How is JavaScript validated or listed in Visual Code with Salesforce developer experience?
As this Visual Studio Code, I get all the Visual Code, the free thing from the Visual Studio team. I don't believe it is at the moment unless you turn on some linting or validation. What will happen is the way that it works with Visual Code is SFDX sits as a sort of plugin on the side, a bit like Maven's Mate has done in the past. And so when you push to the server, it'll make a call out to SFDX and ask that to carry out a deployment to the Scratch org, hopefully to a sandbox by the metadata API in the fullness of time. But the release notes are very clear that the validation is only on the developer console, so I don't think you'll get any of that by default in Visual Code unless you set it up yourself, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you, Keir. Well, last one at the moment. What will happen to the existing JavaScript?
So these are existing JavaScript buttons which have JavaScript in the. It depends what you mean by JavaScript buttons. So if we're talking JavaScript buttons which are dodgy ones stuck in where you shouldn't have JavaScript, then those will stop working. If you're in Salesforce Classic and you're talking about genuine JavaScript buttons that have been configured, those will still carry on working as they did, but they'll only ever be available in Classic because Lightning is all built using Lightning components with isolated JavaScript, so they wouldn't transfer over there. Rather than creating a JavaScript button, you'd be expected to create probably a page action, and if you needed to go down to the level of a Lightning component, then you would do that, but they won't be transferable across for sure. That's the one area I've heard, I've been told many times you've got to rebuild those because it just doesn't transfer. They don't like effectively that JavaScript executes a kind of peer level to the Salesforce JavaScript, whereas with Lightning components, when the locker service is turned on, you're kind of almost Sandboxed is the term I want to use because it's the correct IT term, but sandbox means something different in Salesforce. So effectively, they're in an isolated kind of secure container, and they can't reach out and start tinkering with any of the Salesforce JavaScript and changing the standard behavior or anything like that. So it's a security feature to stop rogue code basically getting up to something dodgy and persuading our users to give away secure information that they shouldn't because they think it's standard Salesforce, but it's not. A very long-winded answer there, but basically they'll still work on Classic if they're regular JavaScript buttons, but they won't work in Lightning.
Yes, that was a very long answer to a very short question.
I like to set the bar low and fail to exceed it.
Okay, no further questions, Milan.
Excellent.
Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you found the session useful.